The kingdom of Zorath was one of the most powerful and ancient in the galaxy. It had conquered countless planets, established great cities, and its people were known for their unmatched strength. But in the grand halls of the royal palace, something was missing. Princess Solara, the king's only daughter, was born blind, and because of this she was often ignored by her people, her family, and even the royal court. Despite her royal blood, she was seen as a burden, a weakness in the eyes of those who served the kingdom. Solara had never known what it felt like to see the bright stars in the sky or the beauty of the gardens outside the palace walls. For her, the world was a place of sounds, scents, and touches. The palace, which should have been her home, was a cold and lonely place. She was kept in the shadows, her movements limited, and her presence overlooked by the courtiers who saw her blindness as a sign of weakness. The king, her father, was a strong ruler, a man whose word was law. He had built an empire, one that stretched across many systems, but he could never bring himself to love his daughter the way a father should. He tried, but every time he looked at her, he saw only the handicap that limited her, the flaw that tarnished the royal bloodline. The court saw it too. Solara was never allowed to participate in royal events or gatherings. She was left alone in her chambers while the palace buzzed with the energy of the powerful. But none of this mattered to Solara. She had learned to live with her blindness and had discovered that the world had much to offer in ways others didn't understand. Her mind was sharp, her thoughts clear, and her memory like a perfect map. She could hear things others couldn't. Footsteps echoing in the corridors, the subtle shift of the wind through the palace gardens, the whisper of conversations she wasn't meant to overhear. In the quiet of her room, Solara spent hours reading ancient texts, using her fingers to trace the words etched into the surfaces. She wasn't like other royal children who played with toys or attended lessons on court etiquette. Instead, she focused on her studies, learning about the universe, the various species that inhabited it, and the technologies that her kingdom used to maintain control over so many worlds. It was a world of knowledge that she could touch, smell, and feel. One day, something changed. The kingdom of Zorath was about to welcome a new guest, a human ambassador from Earth. His name was Captain Darius Walker. He was a warrior, a leader, and a respected figure in the galactic community. The king had invited him to Zorath to discuss possible alliances with Earth, a distant planet that had only recently become a significant force in the galaxy. Humans, once considered primitive, by many, had proven themselves to be fierce and resilient. They had survived wars, faced devastating challenges, and still managed to rise to power. Captain Darius was unlike anyone Solara had ever encountered in the palace. He was strong, confident, and compassionate. A man of action, he was different from the courtiers, who were often too busy with politics or scheming to notice the people around them. When Darius arrived, Solara heard his footsteps first. He was tall, his stride firm but calm. Unlike the other ambassadors she had met, he didn't hide behind formalities. He came to the palace to speak with the king, but he also wanted to learn more about the world that surrounded him. When the king greeted Darius, Solara overheard their conversation in the grand hall. The king was busy giving orders, preparing for the important meetings ahead. But Darius, who was a man of honor, took a moment to step aside and, to the surprise of the court, asked to meet the princess. Solara had no idea why he wanted to meet her. She was the blind princess, the one nobody cared about. But for some reason, Darius had made the request. And the king, ever the politician, saw it as an opportunity to show that his family was open and gracious. He reluctantly allowed Darius to meet Solara, knowing full well that it was nothing more than a formality. Solara was in her room when Darius entered. She had been sitting by the window, listening to the sounds of the gardens outside. The scent of the flowers filled the air, but it was the soft whisper of the wind that always calmed her. The sound of footsteps approaching broke her concentration, and she turned her head slightly to the door, knowing who was there without seeing him. Princess. Solara! Darius's voice was deep and warm, like the sound of a distant thunderstorm. It's an honor to meet you. Solara smiled softly, though he couldn't see it. The honor is mine, Captain Walker. I hope your journey was not too difficult. Darius stepped closer, careful not to disturb the calm atmosphere. Not at all. The stars were kind to me. I've heard much about you, Princess. Your kingdom is powerful, but I believe you have much more to offer than just being a symbol of it. Solara blinked, her mind working quickly. I'm afraid I don't. Understand, Captain? How could I offer anything more than what is already expected of me? Darius took a moment before answering. I've met many great leaders, Princess, but what I've noticed in you is not what others may see. It's your mind. You've spent years learning about the galaxy, about the people and technologies that shape our future. That, to me, is a true leader. His words were unexpected. Most people only saw her blindness, but Darius saw beyond it. His words weren't meant to pity her. They were meant to acknowledge her value. Solara had always known that she was capable of more than what the court saw. But hearing it from someone like Darius, a respected ambassador, was a different kind of recognition. For the first time in a long while, Solara felt seen. Over the next few days, Darius continued to visit her. He spoke of Earth, of the challenges humanity had faced, and how their resilience had shaped their future. But he also listened to Solara, learning about her unique perspective on the universe. The more they spoke, the more Darius realized that Solara's blindness wasn't a flaw, it was a gift. She saw things in ways that no one else could. While others relied on their sight to understand the world, Solara had developed other senses, other ways of understanding the universe. Solara shared with Darius her theories about the galaxy's different species and the challenges they faced. She had studied their histories, their conflicts, and their cultures in great detail. Darius was amazed by her knowledge, and he began to realize that the princess had the potential to be more than just a royal figure. She could be a leader in her own right, one who had the ability to unite different species, to bring peace, and to lead with wisdom and empathy. The other courtiers began to notice the growing friendship between Darius and Solara. At first they whispered in the corners of the palace, casting curious glances at the human ambassador who spent so much time with the princess. Some were skeptical, wondering why Darius was so interested in someone they considered a weak link in the royal family. But Darius didn't care about the whispers. He had found something rare, a mind that was as sharp as any warrior's blade, and he had no intention of letting it go unnoticed. It wasn't long before the king noticed as well. He had heard rumors of the growing bond between his daughter and the human ambassador. But he didn't give it much thought at first. He was more concerned with politics and the upcoming negotiations with Earth. But when he saw how Darius treated Solara, how he spoke to her with respect, how he saw her as more than just a princess, something inside the king shifted. He began to question whether he had been wrong about his daughter all these years. As the days passed, Solara found herself looking forward to Darius's visits. His presence brought a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in her life, she felt as though she wasn't just the princess who had been cast aside. She was someone important, someone whose voice mattered. But as Solara's friendship with Darius grew, so did the tensions within the court. The king's advisors whispered in the shadows, and some even suggested that Darius's interest in the princess was nothing more than a strategy. After all, if a human ambassador could get close to the royal family, it might open doors to an alliance. The political game was always at play, and Solara knew it. But in her heart, she didn't care about politics. She cared about what Darius had shown her, that there was more to life than what others saw on the surface. One evening, as the sun set over the kingdom and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Darius spoke to Solara once more. "Princess," he said quietly, "you've taught me something I didn't expect to learn. That greatness isn't just about power. It's about understanding, about seeing things others miss. You've given me a new perspective on the galaxy." Solara smiled to herself. "And you've given me something I never had before, someone who truly listens." In that moment, Solara realized that she was no longer the silent princess in the shadows. She was a force, a leader, and with Darius by her side, she would find the strength to stand tall in a world that had once ignored her. As the days passed in the royal palace, the peace that had settled over the kingdom of Zorath began to crack. Princess Solara and Captain Darius had spent countless hours together, discussing everything from the history of the galaxy to the strength of humanity. The princess, once isolated and ignored, had become a different person under Darius's influence. She was no longer just the blind daughter of the king. She was someone who had found purpose, someone who had begun to believe in herself again. But the peace would not last long. It was in the late hours of the night when the first sign of trouble appeared. The royal palace had always been a place of calm, surrounded by lush gardens and the hum of peaceful activity. However, the tranquility was shattered by an urgent message from the kingdom's military. "Your Majesty, we've detected unusual signals coming from the edge of our system," said General Varric, a seasoned officer of the Zorathian fleet. "It's not a standard transmission. It's alien in nature." The king, King Varus, was quick to dismiss it. "Probably just another ship passing through. You're overreacting, General." But General Varric did not back down. "No, Your Majesty, the signals are unlike anything we've encountered, and they're coming from a very specific point, beyond the last known border of our empire." King Varus narrowed his eyes. The Zorathian Empire had expanded over centuries, and their borders stretched far. Nothing, not even rogue ships, had dared to cross into their territory. He had always believed his empire was invincible. "I'll handle it." "Leave it to my fleet," the king ordered, waving his hand as if to dismiss the warning. But Solara was not one to ignore what was happening. She had been listening from her chamber when the conversation reached her ears. Her mind worked quickly, sorting through the possible explanations. She had always trusted her instincts, and something told her that this wasn't just a passing event. She had to find out more. The next morning, when Darius arrived to visit her, Solara spoke of the message she had overheard. "There's something coming, Captain. Something dangerous." Darius, who had been growing fond of Solara's insight and intellect, paused. "What do you think it is?" Solara thought for a moment before responding. "I don't know, but I sense a threat. The Zorathians have lived too long thinking that they're untouchable, but I can feel that something is out there." Darius listened carefully, weighing her words. He had been in the galaxy long enough to know that nothing was ever truly peaceful for long. There were always forces lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. He had seen empires fall, civilizations collapse, and entire fleets wiped out by enemies who were underestimated. "I'll speak with your father, Solara," Darius said firmly. "We need to investigate this further." Solara nodded, trusting him. "Please do, Captain. I fear the worst." The king, however, was as stubborn as ever. He refused to acknowledge the possibility of an invasion, seeing it as nothing more than a waste of resources to investigate the signals any further. His advisors backed him, insisting that the Zorathian fleet was more than capable of handling any threat. To them, Solara's warnings were nothing but the ramblings of a blind princess. Darius, unwilling to stand by and watch the kingdom ignore the signs of danger, decided to take matters into his own hands. He knew that if they waited too long, it might be too late. He secretly contacted a few trusted individuals within the Zorathian military, urging them to take the threat seriously. Slowly, he began to build a small group of allies who shared his concern about the signals. Meanwhile, Solara's own investigation into the signals deepened. Using her incredible mind and knowledge of ancient texts, she pieced together fragments of information that hinted at the existence of a powerful, ancient enemy, the Cyrex. The Cyrex were not a species that anyone had encountered in centuries. Legends told of an ancient race of machines, once created by an advanced civilization to be guardians of the galaxy. But when their creators perished in a great catastrophe, the Cyrex were left to their own devices. Over time, they had developed their own plans for domination. The legend of the Cyrex was almost mythic, and few in the galaxy believed it. But Solara wasn't convinced. She knew that the signals she had intercepted were too deliberate to be a coincidence. The Cyrex were real, and they were coming. Darius, once a simple ambassador from Earth, was now thrust into a role he had never imagined. He was no longer just a visitor in the Zorathian palace. He was an active participant in the defense of a kingdom on the brink of war. He had always fought for humanity's survival, but now he found himself fighting not only for humans, but for an entire galaxy that was teetering on the edge of destruction. As the days passed, the signals from the Cyrex grew stronger. The Zorathian military began to notice unusual activities at their borders. Ships had gone missing, entire fleets had disappeared without a trace, and reports from distant colonies spoke of strange sightings, mechanical ships that appeared and vanished in the blink of an eye. No one knew what they were dealing with, but the tension was palpable. One night, as Solara was studying the data she had gathered, a loud bang echoed through the palace. It was followed by the sounds of shouts and hurried footsteps. Darius arrived. In her chamber moments later, his face grim. "They've arrived," he said, his voice low. Solara felt a chill run down her spine. She had known this day would come. The Cyrex had finally made their move. The palace's defenses were immediately put on high alert. King Varys, still skeptical of the threat, ordered his fleet to move into position, but he was too late. The Cyrex, with their advanced technology, had already breached the outer defense systems. Within hours, the palace was under siege. Massive mechanical ships, shaped like colossal black spiders, hovered in the skies above. They unleashed waves of energy blasts that disabled the royal fleet's weapons systems. The Zorathian military was helpless against the machines. No one knew how to fight an enemy like this. Solara, who had always been underestimated because of her blindness, now found herself in a position of leadership. She stood by Darius as they watched the chaos unfold, her mind working quickly to find a solution. "I have to do something," she said, her voice determined. Darius turned to her, concern in his eyes. "What do you have in mind?" Solara took a deep breath. "I know where their main command is. The Cyrex have a hidden base beneath the city. If we can get there and shut it down, we can stop the attack." Darius looked at her with disbelief. "Are you sure? It could be a trap?" "I don't care," Solara said. "We have to try." Darius didn't hesitate. "Then we'll do it together." With a small team of soldiers and trusted allies, including a few Zorathian officers who had begun to see the truth of the situation, Darius and Solara ventured into the heart of the city. They moved quickly through the chaos, evading the mechanical forces that now patrolled every street. As they approached the entrance to the hidden base, Solara's mind raced. She could feel the presence of the Cyrex machines, their cold, mechanical minds just beneath the surface. The base was dark and cold, its walls lined with strange technology that seemed to hum with an eerie energy. Solara led the way, her steps sure and steady despite her blindness. Darius kept close, his weapon drawn, watching every corner for signs of danger. They reached the central command room where the main Cyrex control system was located. Solara, using her knowledge of the ancient texts, was able to decipher the language of the machines. She connected her device to the central system and began the process of shutting it down. But as she worked, the Cyrex became aware of their presence. A loud alarm blared, and the walls seemed to close in on them. Darius stepped forward, holding off the advancing machines while Solara continued her work. It was a race against time. Finally, with a loud crackle, the power went out. The Cyrex forces stopped moving. The machines had been disabled. For a moment, there was silence. But as they turned to leave, a new, even more terrifying threat revealed itself. The true leader of the Cyrex, a massive machine that towered over them. It had been waiting, lying dormant until the moment was right. The kingdom of Zorath was no longer the same. What had once been a thriving, powerful empire was now a place of ruin. The Cyrex machines had attacked with overwhelming force, and the royal palace was in chaos. The Zorathian fleet had been decimated, and the skies above the city were filled with the ominous hum of the Cyrex warships. For the first time in the history of the kingdom, it seemed like all hope had been lost. Princess Solara and Captain Darius stood side by side, looking out over the devastation. Their journey had brought them to this moment, and now they had to face the greatest challenge of their lives. The fate of the galaxy, and of Zorath itself, rested in their hands. "We can still win this," Darius said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "We've beaten worse enemies before." Solara, who had once been seen as weak, now stood taller than ever. The darkness of her blindness no longer held her back. Through her knowledge, her will, and her partnership with Darius, she had become the leader her kingdom needed. She turned to Darius, her eyes glowing with purpose. "We have one chance, Captain. We stop them here, or they'll destroy everything." Darius nodded. He had been through countless battles in his time, but this was different. The Cyrex were not just another enemy. They were an ancient, deadly force that threatened everything he and Solara had worked for. But he trusted her. He had seen her strength, and he knew that if anyone could find a way to win, it was her. Together, they gathered a team of the bravest soldiers and allies who still remained in the palace. The plan was simple. Break into the Cyrex's central command, shut down their main control system, and disable their fleet. If they succeeded, the war would be won. But failure would mean the end of the Zorathian Empire. As they prepared to make their move, Solara stood before the group, her voice strong. "We've come a long way together, and now we face the hardest battle yet. But remember, it's not just our kingdom we fight for. We fight for everyone who still believes in freedom. We fight for the future." The soldiers cheered, their spirits lifted by Solara's words. She was no longer just the blind princess locked away in the palace. She was a leader. They had seen her grow from someone who was once ignored and underestimated into someone who inspired courage. Darius stepped forward, his eyes meeting Solara's. "I'll stand by you, no matter what happens. Together, we'll end this." Solara nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "I know." The group moved quickly through the palace, evading the patrols of Cyrex machines. Every step was a reminder of the stakes. They could not afford to fail. As they reached the city's central command center, they saw the massive mechanical structures of the Cyrex looming ahead. The machines were unlike anything they had ever faced. They were cold, efficient, and unstoppable. The group split into smaller teams, each tasked with taking out specific targets to clear the path to the central command. Solara led one group, while Darius took charge of another. The soldiers moved through the streets with military precision, their weapons ready. The battle began as soon as they entered the heart of the city. The Cyrex forces attacked with ruthless efficiency, their machines swarming like a storm. Blasts of energy rang out, striking the soldiers and knocking them back. But the humans and Zorathians were determined. They fought back with everything they had, their weapons and tactics pushed to the limit. Solara, though blind, was an unstoppable force. She could hear the machines approaching, their movements predictable even to someone without sight. With her mind focused and her senses heightened, she directed her team with precision, guiding them through the battle. She was the heart of their resistance, and her strategy was the key to their success. As the battle raged on, Darius and his team fought their way toward the central command. The Cyrex machines were fierce, but they were not invincible. Darius had fought against worse odds before, and he knew that they could win if they stayed focused. When they finally reached the central command, Solara and Darius stood together, facing the control room. Inside, the true leader of the Cyrex awaited them, their ultimate weapon, the one who controlled everything. The leader was a massive machine, towering over them both, its glowing red eyes fixed on them as it spoke in a cold, mechanical voice. "You cannot stop us. We are the Cyrex, and you are nothing but insects to be crushed." Solara did not flinch. She had faced fear before, but this time was different. This time, she was not afraid. "I've seen enough," she said, her voice steady. "You don't understand what it means to be human. We fight for more than just survival. We fight for freedom, for hope, and for the future." The Cyrex leader's mechanical voice hummed in mockery. "Your freedom is meaningless. You will bow before the Cyrex, or you will perish." Darius stepped forward, his weapon drawn. "We'll see about that." The battle that followed was intense. The Cyrex leader was powerful, its advanced technology far beyond anything the humans and Zorathians had ever seen. But Solara, with her deep understanding of the ancient systems, knew how to fight back. She hacked into the Cyrex control systems, using the knowledge she had gathered over the years to disable their defenses. Darius fought with everything he had, his strength and skill unmatched as he faced the mechanical monster. It was a brutal fight. The Cyrex leader unleashed blasts of energy, nearly knocking Darius off his feet, but he kept going, determined to protect the future they had fought so hard for. Solara, meanwhile, worked quickly, her fingers flying over the control panel, as she deactivated the Cyrex's power source. "Just a little more," Solara muttered to herself, her heart pounding in her chest. "We can do this." With a final push, the power of the Cyrex leader flickered. The massive machine let out a horrible screech as its systems began to shut down. The battle was far from over, but the tide had turned. With the Cyrex leader disabled, the remaining machines began to falter. The soldiers pressed on, pushing the Cyrex back and reclaiming the city. But Solara knew that they couldn't stop there. The Cyrex threat was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next chance to strike. As the sun began to rise over the city, the battle finally came to an end. The Cyrex forces had been defeated, and the remaining machines retreated into the depths of space. The kingdom of Zorath had survived, but it had come at a great cost. Many lives had been lost in the fight, and the city was in ruins. But they had won. Solara stood at the edge of the palace, looking out over the destruction. The world was different now, but it was still theirs. The fight wasn't over, but they had proven that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could break their spirit. Darius stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "We did it," he said quietly. Solara nodded. "Together, we did." For the first time in her life, Solara didn't feel the weight of her blindness. She felt the weight of her leadership, the weight of her responsibility. But it wasn't a burden. It was a strength. She had faced the darkness and come out victorious. And with Darius by her side, she knew that she was ready for whatever the future held. The king, once so ashamed of his daughter, now stood before her in awe. "You saved us," he said, his voice filled with respect. Solara, who had always longed for her father's approval, smiled softly. "We saved each other, father." Darius, standing beside her, couldn't help but smile. Together, they had done what no one else believed possible. They had defeated the Cyrex, saved their kingdom, and proved that even in the darkest of times, humanity's greatest strength was its will to fight. And as the sun set over the kingdom of Zorath, they knew that the future was theirs to shape. A future where anything was possible, and where no one would ever again underestimate the strength of the human spirit.